Welcome to Supervision. I am Robert Farrell, licensed professional counselor supervisor here in the state of Texas, working out of the Montgomery County area just north of Houston. And I created this YouTube channel to assist in the development and promotion of the LPC associates under my supervision. It has been a while since my last video, and I need to apologize for that. I spent a good bit of this last winter finishing my doctorate, completing my dissertation and my defense, and it is done. I am now a doctor of education with a special emphasis in community counseling and care with a cognate focus on trauma and traumatology. In any case, this session we need to address cultural competency. Now, I do want to point out, I've waited on this topic for a little while. I want to spend a little bit of time reading up on it, studying it. This is a difficult area to discuss for a lot of folks. Culture is one of those things in America that is extremely divisive and difficult. And as a therapist, we're going to identify some aspects of this session about why having cultural competency is so vitally important in our practice. So why exactly is cultural competency important? Well, Georgetown University's Health Policy Institute has on their website this quote, and I found it to be extremely remarkable with regards to the specifics of what we're looking at. And it states racial and ethnic minorities are disproportionately burdened by chronic illness. Racial and ethnic minorities have higher morbidity and mortality from chronic disease. The consequences can range from greater financial burden to higher activity limitations. Among older adults, a higher proportion of African Americans and Latinos compared to white report that they have at least one of 7 chronic conditions. I had to pause there, I lost my spot. These conditions include asthma, cancer, heart disease, diabetes, high blood pressure, obesity, and in our category, anxiety and depression. These rank among the most costly medical conditions in America. I want to talk for a moment about personal experience. I've seen this happen over the last 30 years of my healthcare industry work history. And what I've noticed is this to be very true. Back as far back as the mid-1990s, it was my observation then that African American, Black culture, Latino, Hispanic, and even Asian culture in much of America, in this region at least, was underserved. It got even more so when I moved into dealing with mental health issues, anxiety and depression, homelessness, schizophrenia, schizoaffective, bipolar disorder, extremely high rates of the population. And because of that, it was easy to identify that these chronic conditions had a lot of comorbidity, connecting not just the medical problems, but the emotional problems and difficulties and strains of getting medications, proper frequent healthcare checkups, getting the mental health need and support that is so required in this population for those problems. It is absolutely imperative that we have an understanding of culture because it is such a debilitating issue. I think it wise at this point also that we look at some terminology, specifically 2 words, culture and cultural competence. Culture has been defined by multiple scholars across several generations from different disciplines and fields of study. That would include like sociology, psychology, law, as well as history, in pretty much any of the social study areas that science would refer to as the soft disciplines. In any case, I think one of the things that we find is that there's a multitude of responses. A summation of defining culture is that it is a learned behavior specific to groups of individual peoples and evidenced by shared patterns that include beliefs, values, language, rituals, and customs. Now, these oftentimes come from a period of socialization. It's a process where a person is born into it and grow into that culture. The culture itself can change and mix and be very diverse. Even within a larger culture, there can be subcultures. So there's a generalized idea of values, language, and rituals, and beliefs. But they can be even more specific depending on what part of the region of the country or what social economic class that culture finds themselves in. It is really quite amazing. So let's take a moment and look at cultural competence. What is meant by that? So this is based upon 4 understandings. The first one is awareness of one's own cultural background. In other words, you need to know where you come from. What is your ethnic background? What is your cultural identity? It's very important as a counselor that we know our own. And we're going to talk more about that in a little bit. The second attitude is about differences. How do we face differences when we are seen dealing with them directly, when they are in our face, so to say? What is our attitude towards them? What is our beliefs about difference? Is it acceptable? Is it something you would embrace? Or is it something that a person finds disgusting? I use that expression with regards to food items. I'm a firm believer that if you want to get to know a culture, begin with the food, move into the language, move into other areas of understanding, ask a lot of questions, begin to see how you view your differences compared to theirs. Third is knowledge of different practices, worldviews, and ideologies. This one here involves also politics, religion, beliefs of right and wrong, ethics and moralities. The fourth and final cultural competency area is interacting with people of those different cultures. And we're going to look at that a little bit more closely here in a moment. But to summarize, cultural competence is a sincere and humble way of facing and welcoming the diversity of your colleagues in the supervisory process. And this statement, that quote, I took right out of Watkins and Milne, the 2014 book on clinical supervision. This is a distinct area that I have to address with you as my LPC associate. It is my responsibility to have this conversation, and we need to have it very open and frank while addressing specific areas of your development and understanding for your cultural competence to be increased. So we need to talk about 5 perspectives of influence. We just got done looking at the 4 aspects and awarenesses that we need to take into account, but there's 5 more perspectives that influence a person's thinking, beliefs, and their cultural identity. And the first one is political context. This would be with regards to a class differentiation, political ideology, and social structural differences. This category, I think, was seen in America heavily when we had the events in Washington, D.C. Political ideologies really came into conflict between the different political parties. social structural differentiations there, not just include education, the class differentiation of career paths. There's a lot involved in the political context of a person's developing their identity. The cultural context, number two, includes values, norms, rituals, and customs. So I want to talk for a moment about values and norms. You may have heard of the Protestant work ethic. Well, that one is a cultural context that involves the values and rituals through a spiritual quality of a certain group. Now, we can also include into those areas and customs of social environments with different, not only political, but spiritual aspects, holidays, Christmas, Kwanzaa, Hanukkah. There's lots of them. You pick a culture and there's going to be one there. The values and norms within that culture helps to dictate their identity and your identity with regards to what is acceptable practice, what is a moray versus a taboo, what's morally acceptable, what's okay, and what is not okay. Number three, organizational context. This is really an interesting one with regards to an occupational hierarchy, supervisory authority, decision-making process. This is oftentimes seen like right now within supervision, where it's a problem that can evolve between myself as a supervisor and my associate as a supervisee. Additionally, this can take place in problem areas where you may be working with a client who has an occupational position. They see themselves beneath you or lower than you. And so in some cultures, they're going to defer to that education and that idea of superiority by avoiding eye contact. Okay? And this is one of those areas that we have to recognize is a cultural influence. And it's an organizational one. There is power structures involved that we grow up with that we may not be completely aware of. Number four, professional practices. This category involves clinical abilities, professional roles, staff participation, learning process, and supervisory interactions. Now, this one, with regards to the therapeutic relationship you will have with your client, kind of falls in place again with the organizational context. Your knowledge can really be an influence. One of the things I've noticed, and one of the things that I wanted to bring up in this session, is having obtained my doctorate, I am now being called doctor. And I don't see myself as one because I'm not a medical doctor. I'm a doctor of education. I don't personally see that as being a professional title. Okay? I earned it, sure. Took 7 years of education, but I don't see myself as a doctor. However, my clients do, and they're placing that professional quality of an organizational context and educational context of practice, elevating me up. So the interaction I have with them on a therapeutic level, they're going to, in some cases, elevate me. I need to be aware of that and become more conscious of what I say, how I say it. The same may be found in your case. With a master's degree in counseling, you may find yourself talking to someone who has just a general education diploma. They didn't even graduate high school. They took the exam and moved on. Or they may not have anything above, say, a 9th grade education level. We do find that in this region quite often. And so there's going to be a lot of what I would call deferring, the deference of saying, you're the knowledgeable one, you need to fix me, help me. That can be very influential. personal characteristics. This is individually specific to personal background and unique misses of the supervisee and supervisor relationship. Here again, this came directly out of a training manual for supervision, but this applies with regards to age, gender, religion, appearance, skin color, country of origin, as well as other racial components. There was a period of time when a lot of the world based its ideologies and cultural acceptances upon what country you came from, what was the last name, what was the spelling of it, what religion was it, the expression of on the wrong side of the tracks came about because of a lot of these qualities. Age, for example, and gender. Right now in the U.S., we're going through some major political as well as ideological issues regarding gender and sexual orientation and sexual identity, as well as age. There's been a large push for a youthful quality in our culture. We're going to look more in detail at these as we go. So right away, you're going to notice something that will probably invoke a strong emotional response. If not, then one of two things has happened. Either you don't know who you're looking at, and you may not have had a lot of exposure to historical figures in school, or you're on the other side. You may be in agreement. But there's 5 stages of cultural competence development that we need to look at right now. Stage 1 is this, and I chose this image because of what stage 1 is about. Stage 1 is defined as consists of a cultural destructiveness and is identified as the greatest form of incompetence with the possibility of intentional undermining of cultural and contextual issues. Examples would include destruction of another culture's existence. And anyone that's had any time on the History Channel knows that that is Adolf Hitler, and one of the things he almost accomplished was the complete genocide of a whole culture group, the Jewish culture, based upon not so much religion, but his own personal issues as well as a cultural issue problem with one significant culture and history in the world. The destructiveness here of stage 1 is truly incompetence. The individual that falls into this category knows they have biases and they hold to them harshly. They don't like other people. They can be oftentimes seen as xenophobic and extremely difficult unless you fall into line with their ideology about right and wrong. And it's individuals such as can be very difficult to be around. But this is stage 1. This is early development. Usually there's a lot of unawareness involved. Speaking of unawareness and ignorance, I love this quote from Martin Luther King Jr. Nothing in all the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity. That is stated straight from him. It is a quote. I verified it. Now, stage 2 is about this. Cultural incapacity is a huge issue, and it's often seen as an unintentional cultural destruction, mostly through an individual's ignorance. And it's oftentimes evidenced by bias and lack of intent to understand. I think the key ingredient on stage 2 is a lack of intent to understand. The bias may or may not be aware by the person, but they are conscientiously, dangerously ignorant, and they don't want to make their change. In this category, there is oftentimes a concept of separate but equal. Just leave me alone, I'll leave you alone, as kind of the attitude I've heard from some folks. It can be unintentional in the cultural destruction. It is oftentimes the destruction quality to it is not directly intended. If it were, that would be stage one. That's the real difference. Was it intentional or was it unintentional? Stage 3 of the 5 stages of cultural competence development is cultural blindness. This is kind of considered the middle of the road of the 5, because you have 2 on one side and 2 more on the other. The key focus here is that cultural blindness is an attempt at equalizing. Yet this is still considered cultural incompetence. Now, I want to talk personally for a moment about my own experiences with cultural blindness. Having been in the military in the 80s, during the, not really the height, but the demise of the Cold War, there was a large push to be colorblind. Everyone was considered to be green. We were all servicemen, all brothers and sisters under the color banner of your respective branch. Now, I'm going to say that that was also a lot of hogwash. There was so much ignorance of culture and rejection within units, whole platoons and companies of men that were forced to work together, and they despised each other for no reason other than the fact that they were different. And my experience in recognizing that was that it was sheer and utter stupidity, just like what Martin Luther King Jr. pointed out. There was no reason for it whatsoever, not in the differences in the willful ignorance and of seeing it. Being blind to it is an attempt to say, well, there's equality here. Now, it's a personal belief. I think they were trying to come up with kind of that Lady Justice, the statue for lawyers that shows a lady that's blinded, she can't see, and she's using scales to weigh out justice. The scales balance, there's equality. Well, the problem with that is, even though you're blind, you're still going to hear the differences. You're going to still pick up on the word usage. There is no such thing as true culture blindness. It is not possible. Even with this image, one of the reasons I chose this image was because, of course, we've got a child here hitting a piñata, and candy's flying everywhere. There's different colors in the candy. The animal that's being hit is black and white. But yet at the same time, can we tell what culture the child is? No, we can't. This is a phenomenon common in this region of Texas. All colors and ethnic groups have been known to do piñatas, even though it stems from a Hispanic Latino background and heritage. It's common for a lot because it's frankly a lot of fun. So the idea, though, of being blind here is quite significant. Stage 4 of the 5 stages of cultural competence is very contrasting from the first 3. This one's known as cultural pre-competence. At this stage, the individual is not fully accomplished, but is making an attempt, a good understanding, a good beginning at accepting of differences. Here I like this image because it shows obviously different skin colors and they're holding up each one a different item. But there is differences, and if you look closely, you'll notice how they're holding up similar items in different hand colors and different imagery there. So there's recognition that there is similarities, even though there's also a lot of differences. pre-cultural competence is really, in my mind, the beginning of acceptance of difference. Now, there is a fine line of acceptance and embracing. And I think that's the difference between stage 4 and stage 5. So here in stage 5, also known as advanced cultural competence, this one is characterized by respect for differences. It's not just that, I think it's more than that. It's an embracing of difference, recognizing that through the differences, the group is stronger, the organization as a whole becomes stronger and more capable. The pursuit of improving those relationships between different individuals becomes a key focus. This is the last of the stages. This is the one you are striving to obtain and reach to. Let's look for a moment at what the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services has to say about this topic. Cultural competence refers to the ability to honor and respect the beliefs, language, interpersonal styles, and behaviors of individuals and families receiving services, as well as staff who are providing such services. Cultural competence is a dynamic, ongoing developmental process that requires a commitment and is achieved over time. So I want to add to this a special emphasis on recognizing the developmental nature of it. I have said this many times on many levels and contexts. Who I was when I began as a therapist is not who I am today. Okay, I've been at this for a long time, not as long as many of my peers that I know, but it's been a while. And who I am today is nothing even remotely similar to who I used to be. I can only imagine where I'll be in another 10 years or 5 years with regards to my cultural competence and over the time of embracing and learning more about cultures, which is another key component, I think, to working in this region of Texas, because we have such a diversity of culture. The Houston area and the greater Houston region is so different and diverse that anyone attempting to not embrace differences really shines as their biases come out. It's amazing to see, and you will see it as a counselor. You may even experience it directly firsthand as an LPC associate. If you stay in long enough as an LPC, you will see it. So a little time for some self-reflection. I would like each person watching this video to pause it and read through these questions. What did you think when a client of yours informed you of their culture and that it was different than yours? Say theirs is culture X and you came from culture Y. What was your first gut reaction? How did you feel about that difference? What did you do in response to that difference? What demographic variables do you use to identify yourself? Also, what worldview, values, assumptions, and biases do you bring into counseling with you from your cultural identity that may be different than your clients? And what struggles and challenges have you faced working with clients who are from a different culture than your own? Take a moment and really self-reflect on this. This is how we begin to make progress and growth and developmental changes in our own cultural competency. So now that you've had some time to reflect on your own, and I hope you did take a moment to pause and just contemplate some of what we've talked about, let's take a little bit deeper. Okay, let's deepen our understanding. And I want to talk for a moment about 3 layers of depth: personal, clinical, and company. You have a personal cultural background that you come from, and that's what we've talked about in the previous slide, becoming more aware of your own. The next level is that clinical program or team level. What is the belief of your own team that you're in? We do in the healthcare industry promote a team approach. Psychiatrists, psychologists, social work, counselors, therapists, we all work together in a clinical setting, unless you're in a private practice all by yourself, which in that case I would encourage you, especially after you become fully licensed, to involve yourself with a team of some kind. Surround yourself with other therapists, LMFTs, LCSWs. Get others around to deepen our own growth. Now, the third one here is company and organization and administration levels. Okay, when you're working for a much larger organization, then there's going to be a culture in that organization. Learn it. Get to find out what it is. This can be an opportunity to recognize your own biases, your own cultural identity, and how you fit with that organization. I want to talk for a moment about this image. I obtained this image from Samsha's tip series, and if I remember right, I pulled this one from tip 21, I believe, talking about cultural competencies at an individual staff member level. Now, what you're looking at here is basically a three-dimensional concept image where each line or column represents different qualities. So we've got rows and columns. In the very top hand row, you'll see where it says cultural awareness, cultural knowledge of behavioral health, cultural skill development. And then as you're going back on the left, you'll see the different ethnic groups and minorities. Below that is individual level, the clinical program level, and the organizational level. Those are the three layers of depth that we mentioned in the previous slide. But across that top, if you see each one of those, you have to ask yourself, how much awareness do you have of a culture that's listed there that's not yours? So in other words, if you are of African or Black American background culture, okay, that's all awesome, that's amazing. What do you know about Native American culture? How much do you know, if any? Okay. Other aspects would be if you are of the white American culture. How much of Asian American do you know? How much of Hispanic or Latino American do you know? You know, it is becoming more and more prevalent for people to be mixed of different cultural backgrounds. You can no longer base the visual quality of looking at someone and saying, okay, this person is obviously Black American. They may not be. They may be South American. Just because their skin color is darker doesn't mean anything with regards to their culture. How much of that culture are you aware of? How much of it do you know? And then more importantly, with regards to behavioral health, how does your position as a counselor interact with that culture's awareness? Then your cultural skill development. Integrating all of these things are very important. For example, in Japan, LPC there, our counterpart in Japan, is not allowed to live, this is by law, legally, and you can Google this and find out, they're not allowed to live within 50 miles of where they work. So if you want to live in Tokyo, you cannot work in Tokyo. You have to leave and take one of those trains that travel so fast, which is a good thing to have them, and you have to work 50 miles away. The concept behind this is that because the culture is so based on a small community mindset and the shame factor of having a problem and the stigma of needing to seek help is so strong that the government has declared it necessary for the individual to, counselor that is, to not accidentally bump into their client when they're not at work. So in context here in America, one of the things that we tell our clients, and you should too, is that if you see me in public, I will not approach you. If my client approaches me, that's fine, but I will not approach them. I will not shake my hand in the air and wave and call out my name. It is not my responsibility or my right to call them out in public, because what if people around me know that I'm a therapist and that I work with addiction groups and I work with those that have sexual traumas? Well, people in my area of town, they know what kind of work I do, they know where I work, and I'm not going to embarrass someone like that. So I tell my clients, if you see me in public, I will not say hello first. If you approach me, that's fine. That is your choice to, while I tell them is to violate their own HIPAA and what that means, but I won't do it first. Culturally speaking, that is pretty much all we have to do here in this region of the world. But in Japan, very much more structured, very legal with regards to where they can work and where they can go to have fun. So if you live in Tokyo, you have to work somewhere else, and then you can't go to that community for a weekend visit. It's just not considered appropriate or a good etiquette. So I like this image because of its three-dimensional nature. Take a moment and really study it, identifying how all of these components fit into you, how much awareness you have of each of those cultures. Kind of important, especially working in a highly diversified field and region that we're living in. So let's change gears for just a moment and look at administration aspects. One of the things that will happen as an LPC, at some point in time in your career, you will get involved in administrative decision making. You will at least be asked your opinion about things. It may not happen for a few years. It may happen right away. Everybody's in different organizations and circumstances. But as a counselor, it is important for us to be watchful of problems that can arise in therapeutic relationships, especially when two individuals, counselor and client, or counselor and administrator, or administrator and counselor, depending on what role you're in at the time, there are differences in cultural context. So we're in an industry field where we are required to have a deep understanding and appreciation and skill set of being able to work with almost anyone. And so there's four things that I want us to talk about quickly here with regards to what to keep an eye out for. Number one is unintentional racism. It is sometimes observed. It may not be realized, okay? Somebody may share an inappropriate joke, not realizing that it was actually quite hurtful and racist. And that happens a lot of times, just moments of ignorance. Power dynamics, number two. This one is probably the most insidious of the four, in the sense that we can both receive and give that differential between power, and it's something that you want to keep an eye out for and check yourself. Am I being fair? Am I being appropriate? Am I being ethical? Am I being confident in my cultural awareness? Is power influences involved? Number three, trust and vulnerability. Recognizing that in some cultures, developing trust and becoming vulnerable is difficult in the first place, especially with regards to mental health issues. And then number four, that communication component. We're going to talk more about that in a little bit, but communication is a huge issue when you are in positions of leadership and management that many of you may become in your agencies if you stay there long enough, or if you move up and change around and move it into different agencies around not just the Houston area, but around the country. Also, as a counselor, you may face situations where even the most well-intentioned of individuals can demonstrate racial identity thought biases that comes out of that power dynamic and differential. These can create all kinds of problems in trust and willingness to expose ourselves and be vulnerable in sessions. Not that you should self-disclose that much, but there are times when you want to become more therapeutically effective, and so on occasion we do have to be vulnerable with ourselves. This is more with regards to that awareness component. Okay, so we are getting close to being done here, but we do need to talk about talking and communication styles. I want to address two primary communication styles. One is high context, and the other is low context. Low context communication is with regards to the use of explicit language. This is found oftentimes in Western culture, such as what we have here in the United States, Western Europe, countries like France, Germany, England, of course, very much a strong, explicit kind of language. You could say, and I'm taking this, I'm borrowing it from some other cultural gurus on the topic of communication and culture, that in white or Western culture, we will use 150 words to express a topic, where 100 words worth of meaning. Okay, so we tend to use a lot more words than is necessary because we want to be very explicit in our understanding. In other words, the explicitness is about exposing language. The communication is very much in the words only. In contrast, there is high context communication. This is oftentimes found amongst minority groups, African American, Black American culture, Latino, Hispanic, also found in Asian culture, Japan, China, and Vietnam. Here, the implied understandings carry a lot more weight. It has been said that oftentimes in this high context cultural communication, 70 words will be used to imply 100 words worth of meaning. I find that just absolutely beautifully stated in that sense, and I wish I could claim it as my own, because it's not. But there's so much of implied understanding from the generalized common area of the culture. So in other words, that expression of lost in translation is very true. Okay, there is an understood meaning behind certain phrases and expressions within a language. And if you don't get the history of the expression, it may not have the same emotional or cognitive impact. So therefore, one of your cultural developmental areas in your competency really is in communication style, understanding high versus low context. And I want to point out, don't be afraid to ask questions. If you're working with a client of a different cultural, contextual communication style, ask questions. If they tell you something that you're like, okay, I don't really know what you mean by that, can you help me to understand? Very important to do those things. You do not have to be the expert of everything. You do not have to understand all there is to know about a culture, like we looked at the previous three-dimensional image. But you do have the responsibility of asking questions. Let the client educate you about their culture. That's what they are the expert of. So I kind of jumped into this topic already about your responsibilities. Counselors, you have the responsibility to actively explore and challenge your own biases, your values, your worldviews, as they relate to conducting counseling sessions with clients. You're also responsible for maintaining personal self-awareness and challenging those biases once they are discovered. You may not be aware of them, but somebody else may point it out to you, and it is your job to then make a difference in them, to open them up and discuss them. You don't want to do that with the client, but you do want to do that with a consultation, a peer, your supervisor, your state supervisor, whoever it is that you have available that can understand what you're going through and help you uncover it and work on it more. Also, we do have the responsibility of educating ourselves about the history, background, worldview, experience of the population that you are working with in the region that you live and work. So, in other words, in the greater Houston area, we have people from all over the world. Now, is it even possible to learn everything you can about every culture? Maybe, yes. If you were to get a degree in cultural anthropologies and really learn about the whole world's cultures, but that would be, I think, very difficult to obtain because there's so many subtle nuances that can take a lifetime to learn. Even amongst one's own born culture that the person is raised in, there may be facets to it that may not be fully understood. So you do need to have a working knowledge and background in some of the most common. And there again, if you're not the expert in all of them, that's okay. Your client is an expert of their own. Ask them questions. All right, so the next two slides has more information about diversity and cultural competence. You'll notice the first one there is from SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, an excellent website. Go there. You really need to check them out. They have tons of stuff, mostly substance related, but they have a lot of good stuff in there. The next ones there are effective therapies for minorities, meeting the needs of racially and culturally different clients in substance abuse treatment. Here again, this one is a substance-specific one. It's in the American Counseling Association's magazine. The next one there is also with regards to substances, cultural competence, and substance abuse treatment. There's a lot of diversity there and difference in substance use, and that is an area that commonly finds a lot of it. So you're going to want to spend some time reading in that area. And here's the second slide on diversity and cultural competence. Cultural competence standards in managed healthcare systems. That's an excellent resource. It's got a lot of information about it, a lot of different groups. For example, Native Hawaiians, Asians, Pacific Islanders, Alaska Natives, a lot of good information in there. Also, develop your own ethno-cultural competence and improve your quality of your practice. A good article is really good. You'll notice I missed up there. There's another one right below it, Cultural Diversity in Health and Illness. That one's a book. I haven't had a chance to get that one yet, look at it, but everything I've read about it has indicated that it is also in that high quality category of developing your insight in cultural competency. All right, so we have concluded this session of supervision with a focus on cultural competency, and I want to thank you for listening. Please leave comments. I'll be the first to say I am not an expert in cultural competence. I've met a few that were. I've been to some of their classes. In fact, one of them covered high and low context communication skills. I took that class several years ago. It was a seminar. It was absolutely amazing what I learned in that one. Any case, this is a developmental issue, and it's going to take time. Give yourself the time to grow and develop awarenesses and acceptances of difference. So until next time, keep doing what you're doing. Keep striving to self-grow and develop and become better at what you're doing. Always remember to remain ethical, make the right decisions even when we don't want to do them, or if they're just going to be difficult. Sometimes we have to just kind of bite it and do the right thing. When it comes to cultural competency, this is one of those areas that not only is it the right thing, but it is mandated. And so it's real important that you as an LPC associate start working and developing your personal understanding of your cultural identity and that acceptance of differences and diversity. Until next time, guys.